So I've been making a lot of progress on the layout recently, and I realized that I haven't really been recording any of it. So I thought now is the time to step back, say hello, and talk about what I've been up to. So my last few videos I talked about how I was making some garbage loads for my trash gondolas. I did some foam contouring for the mountains and the valley area. And really the last big update talked about how the wiring was done, or at least the beginning of the wiring was done. The two individual blocks are completely separate, they're running, the trains are going, and every single one of the sidings has also been isolated. Which also means that I'm finally able to run some trains. And I haven't realized how much I've missed running the trains until I actually got to do it. I set up a different consist every night and I let it go, and what I realize is that the trains run in the background for a few hours and suddenly it's the middle of the night and I've lost track of time. And because I have a full yard in place to store my equipment, I've been bringing a lot of my passenger stuff out of storage, and I didn't realize that I actually had more equipment than I had remembered. At least half of what I've owned, I've come by secondhand. And I haven't paid close attention to what I'm collecting because I have a wish list of things I'd like to get, and when they come up online, I do my best to act on them, providing the price is fair. And along those lines of picking up equipment when I find it, I recently made some purchases this month. I found someone online that just happened to be selling a previous release of Rapido's Via Rail smooth side passenger cars. So we struck a deal, and I now have 2 cafe lounge cars and 1 day-nighter, which means that I now have a fairly plausible train using my F units, which are some of my favorite trains. And so when I started going through my boxes and pulling out the equipment, I realized I had a greater variety of cars and engines than I'd previously remembered. And part of the reason for that is up until recently, I haven't had a very good way to store most of what I own. On my old layout, I'd put what I want to run on the layout, pack everything into their jewel cases, and put them in a box under the layout. So a few months ago, my neighbor threw away an IKEA chest of drawers that's a couple feet wide and a couple feet deep and has 6 skinny drawers in it. So I picked it up off the side of the road, I cleaned it up, and it's now my consist storage area. I want to line the trains with some foam core, and I also want to add some sort of little divider so that things are a little more protected. As it stands now, when you pull the drawer open, things sort of rattle and shake, so for the time being I'm laying everything on their sides. But that said, once I started putting trains in there, I realized I had a great collection of it, and I decided one of the things I wanted to do was turn those into dedicated consists. So this layout isn't designed for switching operations, it's a passenger routing layout. So in the spirit of passenger trains, I like to have a collection of different consists over different eras that I can run. But that said, I do want to have some consistencies on the consists themselves. So the combination of engine and passenger cars is plausible. So I cataloged all the engines and cars that I had, and I arranged them by plausible eras. And on the Via Rail side of my passenger equipment, I now have 7 dedicated consists that I can run depending upon my mood and the era I want to show. Luckily, Via Rail continues to just combine any cars they seem to have in the yard. So you get these wonderfully eclectic mixes of different car styles and eras. So combining the different LRC and bug cars that I have on hand, I've come up with 7 dedicated consists. And I've spent a bit of time and I've named them. So the consists that run on my layout today are the Canadian, the Remnant, the Unity, the Border Service, the Corridor Express, the Corridor Select, and the Transcore. So as I've said, I've been running all these new consists and working on the layout and losing myself to time. So what I've worked on this past month, that is the big change, is my elevated city platforms. So in front of me here is my newly elevated city platform. My version of Union Station descends underneath the city. So the open air passenger platforms head under the city through a large arched portal. And the theory is that the station sits atop that, and stairwells and elevators make their way down to the platform base. This is a feature I've spent a lot of time thinking about and gone back and forth on how I was going to construct it. So I've decided that all of the platforms in elevated city areas will be made out of XPS foam. It is moisture and humidity stable, but what I've done is I have faced everything with 1.5 millimeter laser cut plywood. So I've created a large portal for the passenger platforms to head through, and then I echoed that shape and design and created a retaining wall that is visible for almost half the layout. So when I first introduced the design of this layout, I did talk about how it was admittedly large. First of all, the layout sits quite high, and it's also roughly 4 feet deep in its widest areas. And that offers a series of particular challenges in being able to get to parts of the layout. And in that introductory video, I talked about how I wanted to make things modular.
And the fifth and final takeaway from this layout is that I need it to be more modular. Now, I don't mean modular in terms of being able to pick the entire layout and move it. What I mean is that each of the scenes that are on the layout need to be able to be done at the workbench.
So what I've done is that the city, as well as the retaining wall that travels along the backside of the layout, is broken into 2-foot sections that I can remove from the layout and take back to the workbench. So this means that everything that I want to work on in scenic and detail is not done on the layout, which means that I'm not standing on stools and I'm not reaching and leaning all day long. The back wall is made up of 6 of these individual retaining blocks, and as they move along the layout to what's going to be my version of the Bathurst Bridge, they start to step down a little bit. Each of these blocks are about 110 millimeters deep, and that's divided between a roadway and then a building platform. The last few blocks have been stepped down a little bit because I needed a lower elevation for the future bridge that goes at the end of this first area. And that bridge, which is my version of the Bathurst Bridge, will be one of the next projects that I'm going to work on. As mentioned, all of these blocks are constructed out of foam and the laser cut plywood. And one of the real benefits of that sort of construction was that when I was making the portals for the front of the city, they are on an angle, which means you need to cut the portal openings on an angle. And what I was able to do was simply glue the plywood portal openings onto the plywood, and then using a very inexpensive hot wire cutter, I was able to use that as a guide to shape the archways. And so I've got a clean archway that's set at about a 35-degree angle, passing through 2-inch thick foam. Now, I'm certainly going to need to do some sanding, a little more detail work, but it was a very straightforward way for me to create an otherwise awkward shape. I haven't completely resolved how I'm going to resolve the fascia that goes around the end of the city. I absolutely am going to be putting some sort of viewing portal in so that as I'm backing trains into the station, I can move myself around to the back of the layout and I can eye them as they come in and they hit their bumpers. And to that point, I've gone down a bit of a rabbit hole when it comes to these little handheld throttles that I put together. This has become a little bit of a passion project. It's a little off the beaten path for what most people would be doing, but I've had a lot of fun figuring out how to make these work more effectively. And I'm going to be following up this little part of the project very soon. It involves so many other details that I didn't expect I would be including into simple control units. So how am I going to divide my time in the coming weeks? Well, some of the things off the top of my head that I want to deal with is that I definitely want to get my bridges roughed out and put in place. I have 3 of those I need to install. There's going to be an elevated city with 2 bridges coming off of it, and then it will be framed by some hilly mountainous regions. And although I do want to jump into taking care of some scenery and definitely getting some structures built, I feel like if I can just get the final building blocks put in place, the retaining walls, the bridges, and some of the first indications of where there's going to be roadways, I'll feel a lot more comfortable jumping into the scenery because I'll be able to come down, see the layout in its totality, and understand where all the major structural blocks are. I am thrilled with my progress. The layout is finally starting to look like a city, and it's been really inspirational because now I can start to see all of the little areas that I can create some narratives and add some buildings and how to do some scenery work, and I'm really looking forward to jumping into that. So there you have it, a totally chaotic layout update. Things are going well. I'm really happy with how things are turning out. Thank you for stopping by. I appreciate the support, and I'll see you next time.